I am now live. Let me pull up on Insta. There we go. There we go. All good. All right. Well, it's good to be back. Good to be back on Friday. I was not on last Friday because last Friday was Good Friday, so I wasn't going to live stream on Good Friday. I actually came on Thursday night last week, so you can actually watch that. It's still up on my channel, but I didn't stream last Friday for those of you that came Friday, whatever. That's what was going on. But I did live stream last week. I just did it on Thursday night. So that's on the channel, so you can definitely check that out. So it's 10 o'clock. I'll start on time, so we're going to jump right in. What we're going to talk about today. We got so much to talk about today. It's really funny. It's really funny because it feels like so much has been turned up in comic world. And I guess it's because so many things are happening so fast and because there's no longer that much of a difference. There's no longer that much of a difference between rumor and innuendo and leaks. And a lot of those so-called leaks are leaked by the studio. And then some of those so-called leaks are just people making stuff up. And I mean, people just making stuff up. But we're going to talk about, remember, when I come on, I'm going to talk about what caught my attention for the week in comic book world. That's what this live stream is about. So first up, we're going to talk about this right here. Let me pull it up on the screen. I've been waiting on this for a long time, and now that it may be here, notice that it may, now that it may be here, I have mixed feelings about it because, of course, I do. Hello, Jason. Good to see you in the comments. Everybody, when you log on, give me a shout out in the comments so I know you're here. And then give me some comments as we talk because, you know, I'll put your comments up at the end and we talk about them. And I love your comments. That's why I do this. Hello, Eric. Good to see you. That's why I do this, to connect with my peeps. Okay? Because social media is the Comic-Con that never ends. So we're starting off talking about with the supposed rumor / innuendo / leak / whatever this is, that the MCU X-Men is starting with the original lineup. Now, first of all, I have to say that this really did, you know, make my heart skip a beat because I have been talking about this. I mean, you can search my tweets. I have been talking about this for years, that I've always thought it was a mistake for them to start the X-Men without starting with the original 5 because there's so much lore there and there's so much foundation there that you need to really tell the best X-Men stories. Okay? It's particularly true. Well, it's true for all of them, actually. All of them, actually. So let me go through that right quick, and I'll show you what I mean. You need to understand that Warren Worthington III, when he first started out, was a rich kind of playboy. He was really kind of blasé about life. That was a 1%er who happened to have wings. So his family wasn't too happy about that, but he had it all, man. He had wings, he had looks, he had money, he had, you know, houses on mountains. I mean, where's the downside, right? You need to understand that to understand what happened to him when he got turned into Archangel. When Warren got stripped of his natural wings and got his razor metallic wings and lost his natural Caucasian skin and got tainted with blue skin and became Archangel. Okay. If you understand where Warren comes from, you will understand what that did to him and why that makes him so much more of an interesting character And then at some point he grows his natural wings back, but his skin is still blue. I mean, there's just so much there that X-Men have been around for such a long time. But you need to understand that's who Warren started out as. Okay. And then Scott, you have to understand that Scott has always looked like he's holding in a burp. Scott has always been tight. Scott has always been kind of stiff. His nickname was Slim Summers, but he was always kind of anal, I would say. He was always about business, but not good with expressing himself, and always rather uptight. And so you need to understand that. Now, I don't agree with where they took him eventually when he becomes the Mutant Rebellion leader, and definitely when he gets involved with Emma. I don't like that at all. But you can see why, Cyclops is not a people person, and he never was. He's a leader, but he's not friendly. He's, again, an uptight person. Okay, from the jump. Hank McCoy. Now, if you understand, if you've read anything about Stan Lee or Kirby, any of the creation of these, you understand that they patterned Hank McCoy the Beast. They said they wanted a monster figure like Ben Grimm, except this time they wanted him super smart. Bruce Banner was super smart, but when it becomes the Hulk, originally became the Hulk, he became brutish. So that changed, obviously, over time. But they said they wanted a Hulk-like character, but this time he was hyper intelligent. So that was kind of the origin of Hank having, the oversized hands and the oversized feet and all of the more animalistic movements. But he's super smart, using polysyllabic words, and he's a doctor, and he understands chemistry and physics, and he's, that kind of guy. And so they thought that was a very strong contrast, and it was back at the time, because you got to remember the original X-Men dropped in the 60s. Okay, and then there's Bobby. Bobby was basically their version of Johnny Storm. Bobby was the laughy, jokey, immature one. Bobby was the one who would, turn everything into a one-liner. Bobby was the one who didn't seem to take things as seriously as he needed to be. And when he first showed up, he was literally a snowman. He wasn't like a human in ice form. He was a snowman, okay, when he first showed up. And then, of course, there's Jean. Lord have mercy. If there's ever any character you need to understand the origin of, it is Jean Grey, because you need to understand this right here. Jean Grey was the most unaware telepath of all time. Let me let you see X-Men #1 as I'm talking. Jean Grey was the most unaware telepath of all time. Everybody around Jean was in love with her. You see Bobby as a snowman, that's what I meant. That's why I wanted you to see that. Every man around Jean was in love with her. And when I say every man, I mean literally all of them, including Professor X. I'll get to that in a minute. But Bobby loved her, Scott loved her, Hank loved her, Warren loved her. And when she first came to the school, they were all freaking out. Like, is that a girl? Is that a girl? And I mean, it was almost something like out of 80s, John Hughes movie. But they were all in love with Jean, and she somehow didn't know that, which still to this day blows my mind, because she's a telepath. So you need to understand that Jean Grey, when she was first introduced, was very unassuming. She was a little bit afraid of her powers. She was very kind of unassuming and quiet and shy, demure, and just somehow being able to read minds and not being able to tell that all the boys loved her, but also Professor X loved her too. Now, I know that would come across as creepy, because, of course, he's the father figure. He's the one putting the team together, and she's 17 or so when they sign up. So him being in love with Jean, So back in the 60s, they probably didn't think of that as that big of a deal. So they wouldn't react to that the same way we would now, because you wouldn't want the father figure of a team of teens, someone that's the headmaster of a school, talking about how in love they are with their student. No, no, no. There's no scenario where that's okay. But anyway, so and Professor X was a man with a lot of secrets. See, one of the things that comes out about him later, one of the things you might not understand about Charles Xavier, is that he's not necessarily the most moral or ethical person. So how people might think of Superman, how people might think of Captain Marvel, how people might think of Captain America, kind of altruistic and, red, white, and blue and all that, that is not Charles Xavier at all. He's a man of many secrets. And he's a man of questionable morals and ethics. And what I mean by that is, just like his arch nemesis Magneto, he's got to decide what kind of line he's going to walk between human and mutant relations. Charles is always struggling with that, because Charles can use his power to take over people's thoughts. So you see it in the first two X-Men movies, if that's your only exposure to them. But Charles can actually invade your mind and make you do what he wants you to do. He's that powerful of a telepath. And then Cerebro amplifies his power exponentially. So Charles always has to decide how he's going to use his power. And he hasn't always made the best moral or ethical decisions. And you need to understand that about him. Now, the biggest fight is always Magneto. If you read the early issues, you will understand that Magneto was just a mustache twirling villain when he started out, very kind of typical of the day. You will also understand that the reason the X-Men were called the children of the atom is because of atomic testing and nuclear fallout, and that causing birth defects in children, and also nuclear waste is actually what creates Godzilla. So, Stan Lee said that he was tired of dreaming up origins. So he just said they were born with it. But the children of the atom part comes from the, developing the atomic bomb and the nuclear waste and the fallout and everything that we've discovered, the impact of atomic power. And so it got into the bloodstream of people, and mutants started being born, is the original idea. So I talked about the fight. The biggest fight is always, Lord have mercy, ABJ had a big fight on that on Twitter in the last 10 days. The big fight is always, were Professor Xavier and Magneto modeled after Martin Luther King and Malcolm X? That is one of those subjects that seems to drive people crazy. It's another one of those things where people just seem to lose their cookies. And after reading the tweets and listening to the arguments, I think I understand why a little bit better. It's because so many quote unquote marginalized groups, because y'all know I don't like that word. I know I offend people when I tell you I don't like that word, but I don't like it because of just everything about it is reductive of what I think it's trying to do. Because most of the time, not all the time, did you hear me say not all the time? Most of the time, it's just people saying we didn't get as much attention as this other group, and now you owe us. And that's not true, because don't nobody owe you nothing. If you weren't the popular kids, if you weren't the cool kids, if you weren't in the cliques you wanted to be when you were young, and then later on you say, now life owes me, no, it doesn't. Now, if you use marginalized groups in terms of saying that there are other groups, ethnic groups of people that maybe have had more advantages. I don't think that can be argued, but also it still comes to the same conclusion that somehow you are now owed. And that's just not true. If you make the case that the group or groups, subgroups I'm a part of didn't get as much as this other group, you can make the case for that. But it always goes to, but now I'm owed this because of that, and no, you're not. So I know a lot of people don't like that. I know a lot of people get mad at me every time I say that, but I'm just being honest about how I feel whenever I hear the phrase marginalized group. Because normally it means we weren't the cool kids, we weren't the pretty kids, we weren't who we wanted to be, and now we're just mad at the world, and now people owe us and don't nobody owe you nothing. Don't nobody owe you nothing. Don't nobody owe you nothing. So after having that big Twitter, brouhaha, I came to understand that so many people have personally adopted the X-Men as the avatar for their group, which is not the same as Stan Lee and Jack Kirby meant for them to be that. Now, the one that leaned the most heavily into the other concept was Chris Claremont. He's the one that leaned the most heavily into the idea that the X-Men were not the pretty people, they weren't the cool kids, they were the other. Because I made a tweet earlier talking about how it doesn't make any sense how people would fangirl crush over Johnny Storm and hate and fear Bobby Drake. That didn't make any sense. But Claremont was really the one that leaned into the idea of a war between Homo sapiens and the Homo superior. And I've always loved the concept of the Sentinels, an entire technological field developed to sniff out mutants because Homo sapiens were afraid that Homo superiors were going to replace them because they were the next evolutionary step. See, that always made sense to me. And Ian McKellen's portrayal of Magneto in Bryan Singer's first X-Men movie, that was the core of his character. And in the first interchange he has with Charles in the Senate hearing, I love it. I mean, every line of that interchange is so powerful because Magneto is basically saying, he said it, he said, we are the future, Charles, not them. They no longer matter. And that's what Homo sapiens are afraid of. That when people start being born with genetically based, genetically enhanced abilities and powers, and it's a part of their genetic makeup, they have the X gene, that group of people is going to overrule and throw out and take out other groups, which is a legitimate argument because anybody would respond that way. But Magneto's approach was always, I'm going to get them before they get me. And then the retcon of him being a Holocaust survivor and all that, that was not originally his background. So all that stuff developed, which happens in comic book mythologies, very rarely are all the elements of a mythological background there when the comic starts. Good to see you, Kenius. Tony, good morning. Very rarely are all the elements there when a comic starts. So this is what I mean when I say my overall point of starting with the original 5 X-Men, I think I always thought that was the right move. There's so much there. There's so many rich stories to tell until I've always thought that that's the way that they should go. But yeah, like I said, I've discovered that people have adopted the X-Men as their superhero avatar for representing a group of others. Okay, so you need to understand something about human beings. I don't want, the serenity prayer, Lord, give me the strength to change the things I can and to ignore the things I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference, something like that. See, that's sound wisdom to me. I am not going to spend my life fighting things that I can't change. I'm going to spend my life working on things that I can change. And the main one is myself. That's the one life I got control over. I get to decide what to do with that one. But I'm not going to spend my days fighting things that I can't change. For what? When you die, it's not going to be no different. Do people get that? I don't think people get that. If you want to spend your days on earth fighting stuff that's not going to change, you can. And then when they put your body in the ground and scatter your ashes to the wind, nothing will have changed. And why am I saying that in relationship to the X-Men? Because I'm trying to make this point right here. People are tribal. I don't care if you don't understand that. I don't care if you don't like it. People are tribal. What people want to do is create a situation where they say, I'm in and you're out. I'm in the in group. I'm on the inside. I'm in the clique. Whatever's happening, I'm in and you are not. And so to do that, you have to create sometimes artificial barriers. You have to create sometimes artificial differentiations in humans so that you can count yourself in the in group. You are not going to change that about people. And I'm sorry if that hurts your feelings, but I'm happy to be the first one to say it in your hearing. If nobody ever told you that. That's why so many fights just ain't worth having. People on Twitter just losing their mind about something you're not going to change. You're not going to change the fact that people are tribal. And I don't care what anybody says, people that are out want to be in. That's what the whole inclusion movement is about. Do you understand that? People that don't have the qualities, whatever they might be, of other groups of people, but we have to pretend like they do so that they feel included. That's that whole thing. You understand? On a scale of 1 to 10, it's not the 9s and 10s talking about equality and fairness. Ever. It's not the 5s because average people don't talk that way. It's the 3s every time. I don't care what area you're talking about. Looks, money, popularity, fame, career, relationships, health. I don't care what you're talking about. On a scale of 1 to 10, it's never the 9s and the 10s talking about equality and fairness. It's never people that make good movies talking about, oh, they don't like me. James Cameron don't say that. Ridley Scott don't say that. Spielberg don't say that. Scorsese don't say that. They just keep making movie after movie after movie after movie because they're enjoying that 9 and 10 level. And they have a filmography that dates back for decades. And they keep making 9 and 10 level movies. Oh, they don't like me because I'm an old white guy. They don't like me, oh, because I'm Jewish. They don't like me. Do they say that? Who says stuff like that? People that make movies that are on level 3. Melissa McCarthy with the Ghostbusters reboot. Talking about, well, if you don't like it, you're just a sexist and you just don't like women in the lead. And people didn't dislike that movie because women were in the lead. People disliked that movie because it was a poor movie. But it's the 3s that say stuff like that. You don't like me because you're a racist, you're a sexist, you're a phobe, you're a bigot. And 9s and 10s don't say that ever, do they? It's the 3s. It's people that make 3-level content that think they're supposed to be getting 9 and 10 level results. And there's something wrong with the rest of the world because you're not responding that way. And to do that, the whole inclusion thing, you have to artificially hold that up. You got to hold that up because that's not real. If you're on a level 3, you are not in a 9 and 10 level. But if you want to make people feel like they are, you have to hold that up artificially, which means eventually your arms are going to get tired and eventually it's going to collapse because it's not real. That's like giving somebody a gold medal and telling them to go out there and compete with the best gymnasts in the world or the best ice skaters in the world, and you gave them a gold medal because you wanted them to feel included. Then they get there out there on the ice, and they can't do them backflips, and they can't do them triple axels, quadruple axels. They can't do that. They can't do a floor exercise routine. They can't do balance beat. They can't do that. You can't do that unless you're on a 9 to 10 level. So I've discovered when it comes to the X-Men, a lot of people have adopted the X-Men as their personal avatar for their group. And that's why they get so livid and so incensed about insisting that the X-Men are an allegory for marginalized groups. That was not originally the idea. That idea evolved. I'm not saying that there's absolutely no legitimacy to the idea that the X-Men can represent that. I'm saying that wasn't the original, per se, concept or creation around them. And then Claremont leaned heavily into that. So Claremont said that he was going for more for Menachem Begin, and he wasn't. He said that thinking that Malcolm X and Martin Luther King were the inspirations, he said was presumptuous. He said that he was actually going for more of a Menachem Begin kind of thing. And so it seems that the idea of Professor Charles Xavier and Eric Lynch or Magneto being analogous to Dr. King and Malcolm X seems to come from fans. Seems, but it's been around for so long. It's one of those things, it's like, you know, if you say something long enough, if something becomes a whisper, a myth, then it will eventually become a legend, and then people will believe it. And so it's one of those things where now when it comes to the X-Men, people are so adamant. I mean, if I could show you, I mean, there's so many tweets I got. People are so adamant that the X-Men are that Professor X is Dr. King and Magneto is Malcolm X, and they were always that way, and blah, 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 blah. And they represent the kids that didn't get to sit at the cool kids table. Now, I do like, for the X-Men, I do like the hated and feared by the world they're trying to protect line. I do like that. But the idea was, why is it that people warm up to some people with powers, but they would hate mutants? Like I said, that's why I made my tweet about Johnny Storm and Iceman, because that doesn't make any sense on the surface. And then we talked about, you know, the pretty people. We talked about when you look like Jean Grey, when you look like Psylocke, when you look like Storm, when you can pass for human and you're really, really attractive, as opposed to other mutants that aren't as attractive. So what I like, what I accept, which makes the most sense to me, is the fear of being replaced by Homo superiors. That makes sense for the creation of the Sentinels. That makes sense for the hated and feared, as opposed to someone like Iron Man, whose powers are technology-based, or someone like Captain America, who was created by science, but he was created to be an ally, obviously a symbol for the United States, as opposed to someone born with powers that you can't control, who you are now afraid is going to replace you. That makes the most sense to me as to what the X-Men would represent. Because again, I made a tweet. I said, if you're first meeting Ben Grimm and Colossus, how could you tell who was born with that, and how can you tell who was altered in some way? You can't tell visually. And people keep saying, well, Ben Grimm's origin is well known. I said one more time, what I said was, if you are first meeting these characters, if you don't know their backstory, how could you look at them and tell who was a mutant and who wasn't? So a lot of people chimed in on, they thought that the hated and feared aspect doesn't really play well today, because we have so many superpowered people. Why would people in particular hate the X-Men? Because you can no longer look at mutants, especially mutants that can fully pass for human, and differentiate them between other people like the Fantastic Four, like the Avengers, like the Defenders. Jessica Jones has powers. Luke Cage has powers. Why don't we hate and fear them? Which I think is a legitimate question and argument. But my response to it is because the scientific powers that be and the governmental powers view mutants more like terrorists against Homo sapiens. That's the angle I can accept, because Iron Man, War Machine, Captain America, even Thor, although remember that MCU Avengers, MCU and Ultimates, Nick Fury, Sam Jackson, formed the Avengers because of Thor, because he said once they understood that extraterrestrial life was out there and Earth was right in the crosshairs of it, they put together the Avengers Initiative. So remember that they had the same reaction to Thor and Loki and, beings that come from other planets, other dimensions, other realms, where maybe they have so much advanced science that looks like magic, which is what Thor said to Jane Foster, that what they had in Asgard was their science, but it looks like magic because of Earth's level of development, which made sense. They're a more advanced race, just like Kryptonians. Same thing, more advanced race. So they did have that reaction to Thor in the MCU, and that's why the Avengers were formed. So that's what I mean when I say my take on the X-Men that makes the most sense to me is that once they're discovered to be born with genetically enhanced abilities, the government and the scientific powers that be fears them because they view them as terrorists that are going to try to replace Homo sapiens. That makes the most sense to me. So you guys sound off in the comments, because I'm seeing some comments coming up, and tell me what you think about that. I'm going to put them on at the end when I get to talking. But so that's what I mean when I say that there is such a rich history. There's so many different angles. There's so many different potential stories in the X-Men, until starting with the original 5 makes the most sense and going from there. And I mean, we just need one movie. I wouldn't mind a trilogy, but I don't think they're going to do a trilogy. We just need one movie. And, if that's done well, then it can kick off. The way I would do it is I would put together the origin of the team, like in the comics, at the school in the first movie. And the end of the first movie, I would have them get lost in Krakoa. I would have them get captured, or Professor X loses touch with them on Krakoa. Second movie would be he has to form the all-new, all-different X-Men reboot to go find them, just like in the comics. So that's when we meet Storm, Wolverine, Banshee, Colossus, Nightcrawler, Thunderbird, Sunfire. Okay? We can do that in the second movie. That can even be like the Empire Strikes Back of the MCU X-Men trilogy, where they have to go into Krakoa not knowing what to expect, try to find Scott, Jean, Hank, Bobby, and Warren. See what I mean? I mean, it's very easy. It's very easy to do from a writing perspective. You can have both. It doesn't have to be either or. See that? But like I said, as you can tell by what I'm saying, is that there's so much here. This is such a rich mythology. I don't understand why they would not want to tap into it. And so I would strongly, strongly suggest that if this is true, that they go with this and that they tap into all the elements I've been talking about and put them maybe in seed form in the first movie so they can develop. Because when you read the original comics, the X-Men actually had fans. Did you know that? Did you know that the X-Men were originally like the Fantastic Four that became somewhat of a level of celebrities, and they had to run away from their fans asking for autographs? If you didn't know that, the X-Men were not always hated and feared. That's what I'm telling you. It's a psyop perpetuated by the government that taught people to hate them and fear them because they were going to replace regular people. See, do you see how that makes so much more sense than just a visual, Okay. So now let me tell you the downside. Let me tell you what I'm afraid of. As you've heard me say many times, I did a whole live stream on it. Woke is not over. Woke is not gone. Woke has been exposed as a failure, and woke is being called out by more and more people. But woke is not gone. And since they're introducing Jean Grey in the Spider-Man movie, I guarantee you that's going to be a soft launch of the new MCU X-Men. And they've already said that they've signed Sadie Sink up for 5 films, and she's going to be the central character. What I unfortunately think is going to happen is that Jean is going to form the school. I think they're going to minimize or eliminate Professor X in this reboot. I'm sad to say. Or if they don't eliminate Professor X, I think he's going to be a simp. And I still think the formation of the school is going to be Jean's idea or Moira McTaggart. They're going to have a woman be the actual founder of the Xavier School for the Gifted. I can almost guarantee they're going to rewrite that and make it be Jean's idea or Moira's idea. I can almost guarantee that. And if they do include Charles or Magneto, there's big talk about turning one of them black. So they were talking about Giancarlo Esposito as Charles, and they were talking about Denzel Washington as Magneto. And I'm just like, really? So there's always, that's another heated discussion, is that if you take away Magneto's Holocaust-based past, if he's not Jewish, then you take away a core part of his motivation if you make him African or African-American. And that completely changes the character. And so that's another one I'm not arguing with people about. You fundamentally change a character when you change ethnicity. I don't believe in race. I use the word race just for sake of discussion, but I don't actually believe in race because there's only one race, it's human race. But I do believe in kindred tongues, peoples, and nations. There are different ethnicities. There's different cultures. There are different styles of living on Earth. I believe that. But when you change ethnicity of a character that's always been founded in a very specific ethnicity, you completely change a character. It's not the same character. This is not the same character because it's just not. Okay. So like I said, how I think this is going to go down is I think Jean or Moira McTaggart is going to actually found the school. They're going to say a woman founded the school, just like they had the line with Jennifer Lawrence. There's a lot of ex-women around here. We're always saving the men. We should change the name of the group to ex-women. Oh, that was so obnoxious. That was one of the most obnoxious lines I've heard in my life. But Jean or Moira will found the school. Magneto and or Charles will be black. And then, in the comics, they turn Bobby Drake gay. They'll probably have him be gay from the jump here. They'll probably write it to where he was always gay. It wasn't something that was, quote unquote, discovered later, probably what they'll do here. So, I mean, I hope that they stick to the comic book origin because that's plenty good. I hope that they do, but woke is not gone. Woke is not gone. So I don't really see a way that we avoid getting some type of spin or twist on the classic origin of these incredible characters. I really don't. Okay, so let me move on because I could do the whole show just on the X-Men. Maybe I should do the whole show on X-Men, but I had a few other things I wanted to talk about. Okay, so I'm going to move on to this next one. Next thing I'm going to talk about is I had some big tweets this week. And when I mean big tweets, I mean they went viral. So I told you last week, my tweet about Brie Larson, it got me to my first $1 million range, million view range. I had 2.5 million views and counting on that tweet. And then this one went viral. The question, the original tweet was, who's the best strategist, not strongest, smartest tactician? Batman, Dr. Doom, Captain America, Thanos. I said Batman, it's not even a contest. Doom's flaw in all of his plans is his ego. Cap is great in the field, but larger threats, you can see that sometimes in the movies, his strategies kind of charge and fight. Although in the comics, he's a much better field combatant than he was in the movies. I said Thanos was so overrated. And man, the way people just see Twitter is just abusive. Some days you have to take a break from Twitter. The way people just curse at me, and I'm like, you don't talk to me like that. I don't talk to people that way. I'm not going to be talked to that way. But man, if you could see the way people, calling me a tourist and you never read his comics, all different kind of stuff. And I know all about Thanos from the comics. I just don't have any respect for him. That's the difference. Because his obsession with death always makes him stupid to me. Oh, well, he took over these planets and he's this warlord, and blah, 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 blah. He's got this obsession that makes him do the dumbest things. And I just don't, sorry. See, that doesn't make you a tactician or a strategist. If you have the ability to conquer and control all these races of people and all these resources, since I'm here, it's the same problem I have with the Borg Queen that we met in First Contact. I still maintain that she's a ridiculous character. For who the Borg are and what they represent, the Borg Queen is a ridiculous character. You know why? She was presented as a lonely, jealous, oversexed cyborg woman. I just want you to think about that. The Borg Queen, the one who strips you of your personality and assimilates you and takes away your sense of self and makes you obey her commands, and you no longer have individuality. You're part of a collective. And she herself is lonely, jealous, oversexed, seductive. Oh my goodness, that was so dumb. That was so dumb. That's the problem I have with that character. That's the same problem I have with Thanos, which is why I said he's overrated and pathetic. Now, I talked about the stones here. I didn't really talk about his obsession with death, but like I've said a million times, the way Twitter works is you have to write a dissertation and you have to present every angle from every point of view, with every possibility, with every comic, with every Elseworlds, with every possible thing ever, or else you're a tourist, or else you get cussed out, or else you don't know what you're talking about, or blah, 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 blah. That's the way Twitter is. So you can't just make a statement. You have to write a thesis, and it has to be based on every comic book ever and every TV show. You have to know everything about everything all the time, and you have to say it all right. And you also have to know all the Elseworlds, and you have to know every run. And if you don't do that, then you're a tourist, and here comes all the profanity and all different kind of stuff, and it's just maddening. I'm not going to write a thesis every time I make a statement, and I don't have anything to prove. So people are free to think what they want. I've been reading comic books since I was 4 years old, and I read them because I like them. I'm not trying to prove anything to anyone, so whatever. But I'm not going to be talked to like that because I don't talk to people like that. So, okay, so I said Batman. Batman's challenged Darkseid, Superman, and Lantern Corps because he understands the one thing that most capes don't, how to get in your head. I keep coming back to this. I keep coming back to Batman studied criminal psychology because people seem to keep forgetting that about him. They just think about him as a regular human fighter. I'm like, no. The whole reason Bruce adopted the Bat motif was to get into the heads of criminals and scare them before he even arrives on the scene. That's why he adopted the Bat motif, to become, as Ra's al Ghul said in Batman Begins, an idea, something larger than life, something that you're not sure if it's human or what it is. Because Bruce understood that. And one thing about Batman, the best Batman stories always have him getting in people's heads because that's what he does. It's not just him as a fighter. The reason Batman is a master strategist is because he studies how people think. Now you can see this with MCU Scarlet Witch. One of the things that Wanda Maximoff understood was she tapped into people's fears with her powers. So when Wanda was doing like the mind whammy on people, what she did was she made your fears come to life. And it freaked you out and it made you more susceptible to control. That's what Wanda did when she first gets introduced in the MCU, when we see her in Age of Ultron. I thought it was funny that everybody else had kind of nightmare scenarios. Everybody else either relived the worst days of their life, like Black Widow went back to the Red Room. But Steve just dreamed about going back and being with Peggy, which I found that very, very interesting. I'm like, is that a nightmare? Is that your worst case scenario? Or maybe was that your biggest regret? Because then, you know, there's an echo of that at Endgame where he does go back. But anyway, what Batman does is he gets in your head. That's why I said he was the best strategist, and Lord have mercy. So anyway, this went viral. So I got, 284,000 views on that one. But Lord have mercy, the way that people talked about this. And so I got a lot of pushback, got a lot of challenges, which was cool. I definitely, like to have good discussion. And then I put this panel up, and a whole lot of people said you can't use crossovers because they're not in canon, they're not in continuity. And I had a couple of lectures on how this doesn't count, and that Batman was acknowledging Captain America as an equal. He was acknowledging Cap as a physical equal, as someone who understood enough about hand to hand, as he said that Cap could beat him. Okay, so yes, there are tactics and strategy involved in that kind of stuff. And yes, Captain America is pretty much the best one in the Marvels, in the Marvel universe, but Batman's on a different level than Cap with strategy. And so anyway, people just went crazy. People went crazy. So here's my favorite tweet from Michael Holland. Strategist is Batman, tacticians Captain America, Cap will win you individual battles, Batman will win you the war. I like that take. That was really, really, really well said. I really, really like that. Okay. So again, you guys keep signing off in the comments because I'm going to put those comments on the screen. But man, the ballistics I got over that. But I stand by it. I still say that Batman is the best because Batman knew how to beat Darkseid. And if you notice the way the Avengers kept trying to, especially the movie Avengers, the way they kept trying to beat Thanos and everything about him was to overpower him. Everything about their approach, no matter who was leading, from Carol to Tony to Wanda, their approach to Thanos was trying to overpower him. Do you know what Batman did with Darkseid? Batman basically did a kamikaze play and said, I'm willing to give up my own life and I'm going to blow up Apocalypse and you with it. Batman said, I'm willing to take myself down to ensure that you don't live anymore past today and that all your resources are destroyed and that you can't continue, to be this self-styled God or whatever. Batman said, I know how you think. And you don't think we humans have the nerve, the backbone, the gumption. Batman said, yes, I do. I will take myself out to end you. And Darkseid was impressed with that. Why? Because Batman know how to get in your head. So that's why he's my choice. And I stand by that. Okay. So that was one of my big tweets this week. Next up, this one was even bigger. Oh, Lord have mercy. This one actually got me 730,000 views. This one right here. So DCU Alert said, would Kingpin give Batman a lot of trouble if he showed up in Gotham? I said on the street, maybe. Kingpin does the same stuff Penguin does, except at a much higher level. The problem, that would be when Fisk finds out that Batman is Bruce Wayne. He would then attack him corporately, socially, and personally. That would be a type of war Bruce hasn't seen in a while. Lord have mercy. This is another one that blew all the way up. Okay. And the way people, I mean, it was adamant points on every side that Kingpin is better than Penguin. No, Penguin's better than Kingpin. No, Kingpin is a fighter. He's 380 pounds of muscle, less than 3% body fat. People forget that. No, he couldn't beat Batman hand to hand. No, Batman would, wipe up the floor with him. I mean, literally from every possible angle. DCU Alert gave me a well said on that. But every possible angle, I got some feedback on that, which is cool because that's the point, is the discussion. And so I said in a separate tweet, because remember, it's discussion. Sometimes you don't put everything in one tweet. Twitter is like an old school newspaper. They would splash headlines on the front page. And then if there was a retraction, they would bury it on the 24th page in a very small little column. That's what Twitter is like. If you have follow-up tweets, it's the one tweet that set people off that they're going to keep talking about. And then if you said something subsequent to that, nobody's going to see that one. It's the most amazing thing. So it's like an old school newspaper, which is, again, why it doesn't bother me and I don't sweat it, because I know that's how people are going to act. They're going to take the one thing that you said that triggered them, and then they're going to ignore everything else you may have said subsequently because they just want to be triggered. Whatever, have at it. Okay. So I said it later. I don't remember exactly when I said it, but anyway, what I was referring to, Kingpin's weakness has always been Vanessa. And so when I'm talking about attacking him personally, I said in a later tweet that when a Robin gets targeted, or if Selena gets targeted, that makes Bruce crazy. That takes it to another level, because anytime a Robin is targeted, his guilt over Jason comes right back up. And anytime Selena is targeted, he realizes how vulnerable he is because of his love for Catwoman. How if somebody taps into that, what that'll do to him. That is absolutely something that Kingpin would do if he found out that Batman was Bruce Wayne. Are you kidding me? Excuse me. He would absolutely go after the ones that he loved the most, the same way Goblin went after the ones that Peter Parker loved the most. Same thing. Wilson Fisk would absolutely do that. That's what I meant. So I got all kinds of tweets about how Bruce has so much more money than Wilson Fisk, and and Penguin has more money, and he wouldn't be able to do the same, blah, 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 blah. But and then Vandal Savage is doing something similar, and then people talked about how something similar happened in Joker War. And one of the biggest points of discussion was that they were saying that Batman's rogues do know he's Bruce Wayne. They just don't want to put him on blast, which I thought was very interesting. Because if you take away Bruce Wayne from Batman and he has no reason to pretend to be Bruce Wayne, that means you would get Batman 24/7. And that's what they were saying the Gotham crime underworld doesn't want. They don't want a Batman that doesn't have anything else to do but be Batman. And so that's why they said Joker knows, Penguin knows, obviously Selena knows. They said they know, Hugo Strange knows, they know, but they don't want to unleash a Batman that doesn't have the distraction, the balance, the downtime of a Bruce Wayne. which I thought was an interesting point, that Batman's war would go to all-out war if there's no need for Bruce Wayne. But it would happen like it did in the excellent Batman the Animated Series episode, the one with Scarecrow and Barbara Gordon. Oh Lord, why can't I remember the name? Over the Edge. Why couldn't I think of that name? I love that episode. I couldn't bit more think of the name. Over the Edge. That's what I'm talking about. So Over the Edge, if you haven't seen it, what happens is Scarecrow suckers Barbara into going for, oh, let me pull it up. Let me see. Is this picture big enough? If you haven't seen this episode, you should have seen this episode. Scarecrow suckers Barbara into confronting him on top of the building, but somehow he has time to set up a kind of a mannequin, and he sneaks up on her and knocks her off the building and kills her. After that, Commissioner Gordon goes after Bruce. All of Commissioner Gordon's understanding, empathy, support of Batman is gone once Barbara's dead. And he hates Bruce for not telling him that Barbara was a part of his team. And it's one of the best episodes I've ever seen. I can't believe I forgot the name, but anyway, one of the best episodes I've ever seen of this cartoon. As it turns out, it was a nightmare. Scarecrow gassed her. He didn't actually kill her, but it was great. So I'm sorry if I spoiled it for you if you hadn't seen it, but you should have seen it by now. But anyway, so the point I was trying to make with my tweet about what Kingpin would do if he was in Gotham is he would do stuff like that. That's what I meant about attacking him personally. Outing Bruce Wayne is one thing because Bruce Wayne can overcome that. Hurting the people he loves is different. And remember, once Bruce Wayne becomes known, that puts the Justice League at risk. Wonder Woman no longer has a secret identity, but when she does, she was Diana Prince, but that was way back in the 70s. Aquaman doesn't have a secret identity. Aquaman never had a secret identity, but Aquaman could also pass for human. But if we're talking about Superman and Clark Kent, Flash, Barry Allen told people who he was and told people all the time, but that put Superman's identity at risk. And if people couldn't figure out who Hal Jordan was, because that little mask shouldn't have hidden anything. But anyway, anybody that, I'll put it that way, anybody that had a secret identity to hide, all that goes to crap if Batman gets outed. Kind of like in Starcrossed. The only reason they were able to hide is because they took off their costumes and used their civilian faces, and the Thanagarans didn't know them as civilians. So yeah, so that's what I thought would happen if Kingpin was in Gotham. Now I made a later tweet, because remember, people never respond to the later tweets. I made a later tweet by saying, I didn't say that Bruce wouldn't have plans for this, and I didn't say he couldn't overcome this, and I didn't say that Kingpin would beat him. I never said that. The question was, what would happen would Kingpin give Batman a lot of trouble if he showed up in Gotham? And I said, yes, he would. Yes, he would. Not that Bruce couldn't overcome it. All right, anyway, let me get through the rest of this stuff, and then I'm going to put your comments on the screen. Next up, talking about Maxima. Now, the reason I want to talk about Maxima is because the inclusion and casting of Maxima in Man of Tomorrow is all the proof that you need that this is just going to be another Guardians of the Galaxy clone. That's why I want to talk about this. Because Maxima is an empress. Maxima is a queen. She wanted a mate that was her equal. She saw Kal-El, came to Earth to seek him out, fell in love with him, and basically wanted, him to be her boy toy, wanted to be the queen's consort, because very few men would be able to keep up with Maxima. So she fell in love with Superman. That's basically her story in the comics. She doesn't have any business in this movie. I don't understand why she would be included in this movie. We've already got the Justice Gang is coming back, and their Superman and Lex Luthor are already going to team up, which is stupid. And why are we adding Maxima? And I also want you to notice that Supergirl is not there. That's very telling to me. There's no mention of Supergirl. But anyway, they're trying to cast Maxima. What I also wanted to say is that Maxima needs to be played by a female wrestler. A woman is 5'11", 6 feet, 6'2", needs to play Maxima. I wouldn't have minded Gina Carano, but I think Gina's like 5'8". Gina's not that tall. But she needs to be played by a wrestler if they're going to include her. But to me, the whole inclusion of Maxima in the movie is just more proof that because all he knows how to write is a quirky band of misfits. Okay. And once again, doesn't know how to write a Superman movie to where Superman can solve his problems by himself. I will be so glad when he's gone, except I don't know if I have any optimism for who's going to succeed him. I don't know if who comes next will be better. I really don't, but I am okay. Next up, we're going to talk about the Punisher trailer. Now, I'm not going to show it because it'll give me a sure copyright strike. And I hate that because I would love to play these trailers live so I could talk about them with y'all, but I don't need no strikes on my channel. Okay. So let me just talk about the trailer. It's The Punisher One Last Kill. And it starts off with a close-up on Frank, the picture you see on your screen. Starts off with that. And it's supposed to be a one-shot adventure, but it's basically him facing, like more of his demons is him facing more torment. And Johnny Bernthal actually wrote and executive produced this, or co-wrote it and produced it. And it's him coming to terms with the ghosts of his family and him kind of going off the deep end in an even more way. If Punisher could go even more off the deep end, it's about, this is like what this is about. And personally, I'm here for it. Now, he sets himself on fire too in the trailer. I'm one of the people where I actually liked the Thomas Jane movie. I didn't think it was bad. I understand why people didn't like it. I understand why people didn't like Thomas Jane, but I actually liked that movie. But with Johnny Bernthal's iteration of Punisher, and with this in particular, there's a brutality, there's a visceralness, there's vulnerability is not quite the right word, but there's Johnny Bernthal is able to show you how the Punisher carries his pain. Johnny Bernthal's version of the Punisher carries his pain on his face. He's such a great actor until you can see the kind of torment that Frank lives in. So this is about Frank trying to make peace with the ghosts of his dead family one last time and going all the way off the deep end, set himself on fire. And he wears his classic uniform. He's got the skull jacket and the skull shirt and the skull crest right there. And I'm like, I'm here for it, man. So I am actually looking forward to this. I haven't been looking forward to much stuff that was going to be on Disney Plus or much stuff from the MCU or whatever, but I am actually looking forward to this because I think this is going to crush. Because I think the handle that Johnny Bernthal has on this character is great for the character. And I think the story is going to be a great story. So this is one of the few pieces of future content that I'm actually looking forward to. One of the few. I am actually looking forward to it. It is one of the few. Okay. All right. I'm going to keep it moving. And then I'm going to put your comments on the screen. I'm just going to spend a few seconds on this because, and I'm going to talk about it later when I get to the new comics for this week. So there's a story coming out where basically the symbiote breaks up with Eddie Brock permanently. So Venom is with Dylan Brock, but they're rushing Eddie Brock to the hospital. And this is after Venom War. And long story short, the symbiote and Eddie, Venom breaks up with Eddie altogether. And I just think this whole thing is stupid because the symbiote stuff has been overdone. As far as I'm concerned, they should have stopped with Venom and Carnage. As far as I'm concerned, Venom should always be Eddie Brock. When Todd McFarlane created this character, it was so incredible. So incredible. Someone who had all of Peter's powers, who knew all of Peter's secrets. The symbiote bonded with Eddie because the symbiote hated Peter because he was jealous. He was a scorned lover. Eddie Brock hated Peter because Peter had ruined his career, and their mutual hatred of Peter Parker drew them together. And now you have a character with all of Spider-Man's powers, but also with the knowledge of Spider-Man, because the symbiote told Eddie everything about Peter's life, and he knew everything. He terrorized Mary Jane, and he didn't set off Peter's spider sense. I mean, that was the original Venom. That is the character that I love. Since then, he's become a hero or anti-hero or a joke about him. I'm with a symbiote. Just my take. But Venom should always be Eddie Brock, as far as I'm concerned, the end. Okay? All right, we're going to go to the new comics, and then I'm going to mount your comments. This is what's dropping this week. In Action Comics, I think they're trying to maybe hook Mary Marvel up with Superboy Prime. And I don't know, I'm always leery when they give Mary Marvel a boyfriend because, I don't know, it always seems to be kind of weird because they want to corrupt her. Because, they did before with, Black Mary Marvel and Crazy Mary Marvel. They always want to pervert her because we can't have anything nice and pure and clean. But anyway, so I don't know if I'm going to check that out. Again, that's what I meant about the Venom thing. This is just overdone to me. This is an overdone concept to me at this point. I know that people like it, but it's overdone to me. I might check out Emperor Aquaman. This has been going on for a while, but I haven't read that one. So I might want to check that out because I'm kind of intrigued by that title. Let me see in here. Anything else here that looks good to me? I always love Space Ghost. See, what I do more often than not nowadays is I wait for trades because, like I said, I want to collect everything all together. But some stuff that I still want to get piece by piece, and World's Finest is something I want to get piece by piece. So, I mean, a lot of stuff still going on. What do you guys think about the Absolute stuff? Absolute and Batman is a monster hit. What do you think about Absolute Superman and Absolute Wonder Woman, Absolute Green Lantern? What do you think about that? Like, is it the kind of stuff that you wanted? Because they've basically rewritten the mythology, but people seem to love it. It's selling better than anything they've put out in a long time. So, but anyway, so that's it for the stuff I wanted to talk about. What we're going to do now is mount your comments. Eric says, I also liked one in the Champions run. I did too. I like the original Champions, and I actually like the Kamala Khan-led Champions too. It's the one place that I thought Kamala belonged because the way she formed the Champions in her day made sense. If you don't know that story, basically what happened, because Kamala Khan was always an Avengers fangirl. Okay, and she always obsessed with the team, and so she got on the Avengers for a while, but then they started making decisions she didn't agree with from a generational point of view. In other words, she didn't agree with some of their moral and ethical decisions. So she broke off from them and formed the Champions with people her own age. And they used the technology of the day to kind of push their agenda as a team. I liked both iterations. So the original, the OG Champions was this right here. If you've never read this, Hercules, Black Widow, Angel, Iceman, and Ghost Rider. I mean, you couldn't put together a more unlikely crew, but I like this run. This was all before they became seriously overpowered, especially Ghost Rider. But this is way back in the day. Comics were 25 cents. You see how long ago that was. But I really like this version too, because they were such a motley crew. They're such a motley team. They're always coming from such different perspectives and angles. But I also like this right here. I also liked Mark Waid's run. I love this team. I really like this team because I thought this worked. I think this picture is, okay, there it is. Because eventually they brought the D8, the back in time 15-year-old Cyclops on the team too. But I like this. I especially love Vision's daughter, Vision. I love her. I love her. She's like Data to me. She's logical, but she's trying to understand different kind of stuff. This team works well. My least favorite character is Amadeus Cho, because it should only be one Hulk as far as I'm concerned. But I still love this team. So I love Champions as well. Oh, wait a minute. I didn't show y'all. Okay, there we go. I wasn't showing you the pictures. I was talking, but you didn't see the pictures. Okay, there you go. That's the OG team. That's the OG Champions. Love them. I can't believe I was talking, but I didn't show you the picture. That's the OG team. Love them. And that's Kamala Khan's team. And I love them too. And I love Wade's run on that. So I love both. Okay. Angel was the only member of the original, Angel was the only member of the original 5 X-Men who was an adventurer briefly before joining the X-Men, rich, handsome, and enjoying his powers. He's always the happy one on the team. That's right. And always had lots of women, because of course he did. Of course he did. Warren Worthington III was if Paris Hilton was a guy. Say that one more time. The original incarnation of Warren Worthington III was if Paris Hilton was a dude. That's who Angel was. So that's why you need to understand the backstory. So you understand the sheer and utter psychological devastation of what becoming Archangel did to him. It's something else, man. So that's why starting with the 05, original 5 is the way to go. I think Kelsey Grammer was really good as Hank. Bobby was Johnny, only with ice powers. Maybe not as cocky as Johnny, but Iceman is great. Again, I love all of them. I think Kelsey Grammer nailed the duality. I didn't really like Nicholas Hoult as much, honestly. His performance was just kind of meh to me. It wasn't really outstanding to me. I don't like him or Jennifer Lawrence. But I mean, Rebecca Romijn is Mystique. I mean, you can't follow that. You're not going to top her. I'm sorry. Kelsey Grammer, I think, caught the balance between Hank McCoy's intelligence and his beastly side. So I think he portrayed both well in his incarnation. But that's the uniqueness of Hank as a character. So that's what I'm saying. We need to meet this group and get to know them before we jump into the next iteration. And I think the movies can reflect the changing guard of the teams. But like I said, they're probably going to introduce Wolverine sooner rather than later, because everybody wants to see Wolverine. Can't be Jackman. You can't put Sadie Sink in a love triangle with Jackman and the new Cyclops. Sorry. Can't do that. One of the problems with the X-Men has been so many different writers and their takes on the characters that as a reader, you almost have to choose which storyline or interpretation you'd like best. Exactamundo. We are at that point with most of our comic book properties. That is well said, Eric. Well said. We are at that point with most of our properties. We didn't have so many cooks in the kitchen now. We didn't have so many hands in the pot until you kind of have to choose your. That's why another reason why I think so many of the Twitter arguments are just people just losing their minds for what? You can make different arguments from different time periods, and you can make arguments from the core of a character, core stuff that doesn't change. But at this point with the X-Men, like I said, so many people have adopted them as their own personal mascots for their own causes. But there's been so much spin on it now. But I maintain you need to know the original 5 so you can see what they turn into. The Bendis storyline where they went back in time, I know a lot of people didn't like it, but I thought it was kind of interesting. What if your future was so messed up and you got a chance to go back and warn your 15-year-old self, don't turn into this person? And Jean got a chance to see everything she did as Dark Phoenix. She also found out that Professor X was in love with her. I thought it had some interesting moments, especially when Cyclops joined the Champions. I mean, but yeah, there's so many different storylines and so many different creators out there now. You can't get around Cockrum. You can't get around Claremont and Byrne. You can't get around those runs. I mean, those are some of the best runs in comics. But there's enough now. Joss Whedon's run was okay, but Grant Morrison's run, I don't like the direction he took him in. I will never be a fan of Scott and Emma, ever. And Madeline Pryor, as far as I'm concerned, I don't even understand what was the purpose of Madeline Pryor. Madeline Pryor was a misstep as far as I'm concerned. If you're going to bring Jean back, just bring her back. What's the point of Madeline? I never got that. Okay, and with that tribal mindset I was talking about, people are tribal, people often become self-promoters. Yeah, they do, because remember, the goal of tribalism is always, we're the important people, we're the only ones that count. We're in, you're out. People say it all the time. They're not a real musician. They're not a real actor. They're not a real writer. Now, I've said that. Full disclosure, I've said that. A hacktivist is not a real writer. I've said that. So just full disclosure. But people say they're not a real all the time because what they mean is me and my group, we're in. So I'm guilty of it too. But me and my group, we're in with the real deal and those people. But I really do believe that about hacktivists. Hacktivist was coined by Nerdrotic. Hacktivist is hack writers plus activists. They don't write. They just, like the Borg, they're parasites. They add something and twist and warp something that they didn't create. But people will definitely self-promote their position in their group and their whatever they're trying to sell once they establish themselves as we're in and you're out. Even in public school is always trying to fight that. But we've gone too far with inclusion. And if you want to see what that looks like, finally taken it too far, then Starfleet Academy, which a few refuse to watch that show. All the reviewers that I watch have said they got brainwashed. Just, well, I ain't watching that stupid show ever. But that's what it looks like when you take that too far. Inclusion, making everybody feel included to where the stories are stupid. It's the entitled generation or everyone gets a trophy era. That's right, era. When I talked about on a scale of 1 to 10, it's never the 9s and 10s talking about equality and fairness. It's not the 5s, it's the 3s. It's the entitled generation or everyone gets a trophy era. You see it at the high school level up through the corporate world. That's right. I've seen it often here to see it every day. Me too. Once you got the participation trophy era going, and we know who started that. I'm not going to call the name of the group because then that'll become a thing, but we know who started that. There was a very specific group of people that started participation trophies, but I'm not going to call the name because then it'll become a thing. But when we started telling people that you get a trophy for coming in 13th place in a 13th person race, no, you don't. We started telling them that you are a winner just because you participated. No, you're not. No, you're not. But when we started doing that, that was the beginning of the end. And so now, like I said, it's not directors like James Cameron, Ridley Scott, Scorsese, Spielberg. They're talking about they don't like me because I'm an old white guy or I'm an old Jewish guy, or they don't say dumb stuff like that. They just keep making top level movies. It's people that make 3-level movies. They're talking about racists and islamophobes every time. Not sometimes, every time. One of the hardest hitting stories about hating on mutants was the graphic novel God Loves Man Kills Yes. That one hurt on a few levels. Yes, that's the one I recommend. Actually, I follow the real one, Sophie, and she asked me about recommended, because I always like to recommend strong titles, strong stories to people who are just getting into comics, and that's one of the ones I recommended because that book is really, 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 really powerful. It's really, really powerful, and it's definitive. It's one of the definitive X-Men stories. I know everybody thinks of Dark Phoenix only, but God Loves Man Kills is up there too. Highly recommend it if you've never read it. It's funny that the original 5 X-Men can pass as normal humans even with Scott wearing red glasses. That's not the case with some mutants like Nightcrawler. That's right. When you get into mutants that can't pass as human, that should be a different conversation. So if we're talking about Rogue, if we're talking about Jean, if we're talking about Storm, if we're talking about Banshee, okay, if we're talking about Thunderbird or Warbird, they can pass as human. When we're talking about, Shatter, when we're talking about Nightcrawler, when we're talking about, what's the one whose skin is transparent? When we're talking about Skin, when we're talking about Husk, when we're talking about Chamber, when we're talking about all these people that cannot possibly pass as human, the conversation changes. But the question still becomes, just because they're in an altered form, why would you hate them and fear them? Because there are other characters that alter their form and you don't hate and fear them. So like I said, my take is that the powers that be are afraid of mutants taking over. Maybe the X-Men First Class early years movies got attention for development because super people at boarding school resonates with studio execs, see Harry Potter box office potential. Maybe. They messed up my boy Havoc so bad in those movies until Havoc is my favorite X-Man. And they messed him up so badly in those movies. They made him have hula hoop powers. You think I'm kidding? I'm totally not kidding. They made him have hula hoop powers. I'm trying to pull up a picture. And I couldn't stand it. I still can't stand it. They made Havoc have hula hoop powers in the X-Men First Class. I'm like, that's not how his power works. But anyway, I still think the idea of a school is intriguing. So maybe it is the Harry Potter thing, but so maybe you're right, Jason. I still think that idea is intriguing. I think it has some legs. So we'll see how they develop it. That's going to be the key, is how it's developed. But I still think it's got some legs. They'll make Jean the girl boss. Be prepared for that. I love Denzel, but I'd rather see him as Bishop as an example. Yeah, I think Jean's going to be the girl boss too. I really don't see any way around that one because, like I said, woke is not gone. It's not gone. So I don't see how Jean's not a girl boss in this one, or Moira. They might throw Moira in the mix as well and make the school her idea. But I think they're going to take it away from Charles. I really do. Denzel is Bishop. I think he's a little too old at this point to be Bishop. I could be wrong. But maybe. I think he'd make a great Blue Marvel. Denzel, personally. I think that's the character he needs to play. Denzel's a good actor, but I see him as Professor X, not Magneto. Gene Collins Casino would be as good as Magneto. Maybe Samuel L. Jackson. No, he's Moses Magnum. I don't want to see Charles or Magneto as black because they're not black. and who they are ethnically and historically has everything to do with their development as characters. So I don't want to see that. That's just me, just my take. But I don't need to see that race swapping. Like you hear me say all the time, when they race swap Lana Lang on Smallville, they created a character that's particular, specific to Smallville. Lana Lang is not half Asian nowhere else. And that's what happens when you do that. Jimmy Olsen on Supergirl, making him black. He ain't black nowhere else. You create a version that's specific to that version. So maybe that's what they want. I don't know. Maybe that's what they want, but Thanos wanted to impress Death and makes him a twisted character, not a strategist. Yeah, twisted, I'll give you. That's a good word. Twisted, I will give you. But it just feels kind of beta, kind of whipped to me, honestly. Just feels kind of, really, dude, really? I don't know. I don't know. But twisted, I'll take. Twisted, I will definitely take. But best strategist, no. Anyone who doesn't acknowledge us superior strategic, I guess you're trying to say, you know, some of the tweets I got, that's right. Batman took a vow he will always have his one crime. He will never give that quest up. That's right. Batman's going to fight till there's no more breath in his body. And before he dies, he's going to train, just like he's trained all the Bat family to take over for him. That's right. Other DC strategists, people who think hard to help win, include Adam Strange, Mr. Terrific. Yes. Brainiac 5, Adam, Hawkman, Adam, yes. Amanda Waller, detective types, yes. Agree with all that. They're great strategists too. They have to be. Good list. I'll throw Nightwing in with them. Yeah, Grayson has really grown. And I've really watched him leading the Titans. He's really grown in terms of him being a strategist. Typical Gun, I like the B characters as much as the next guy, but there's reasons why they are B characters. Yeah, we're talking about Maxima and Man of Tomorrow. Why? Don't see the point. Honestly, never really read The Punisher, a little too sociopathic for me, although talking to Punisher fans is between Bernthal and Stevenson as the most best book-to-screen interpretation of Frank. Well, I understand the appeal of the character. I understand he's too over the top. He's too over the edge for some people. I do understand that. But he's like the falling down movies, like the falling down character. He's the ultimate taking the law into your own hands, which we're not supposed to do. But it's when the frustration and the rage gets to the point where you can't contain it. That's who Frank represents. And I know, again, that's too much for some people, but that's kind of the core of what he represents. So that's why some people resonate with him. Because Frank Castle would put the Joker down, there would be no Joker in Gotham. Okay. Always wondered the fascination of Venom. The symbiote is a cool concept, but wow, has it worn out its welcome? Yeah, the fascination of Venom was the original concept of Venom, not what it is now. Now it's just played out. Every time I see somebody with a new symbiote now, I'm just rolling my eyes. Okay, the Firestorm issue is really good. I love the characters, so maybe I'm a little biased. Wait for the trades, but the Space Ghost run has been enjoyable. Yeah, I need to check that out. I really do. Maxima should date Vartox. Also, Maxima looking for a husband who was done with Marvel's her, aka Paragon, in the Quasar series. Yep, but I mean, she's always fun showing up, falling in love with Superman. That's always a fun story. I hesitate to go for absolute time. Wait, you finished the thought here. Hesitate to read absolute titles because every time there's a new mythology like the Ultimates, content becomes gritty, violent, and the characters are very messed up. Yes, because that's what they want to do. They do not want nice characters. They don't want clean characters. That's not what they want. They want perverted. They want twisted. They want dark. They want ugly. How many times do they have to show us that before they get it? But yeah, Ultimates and absolute, yeah, definitely. Poor Havoc in that movie, what were they thinking? I don't know. I don't know what they were thinking with my boy, but they messed him up. They messed him up. They really did. All right, y'all. That's our time for today. As always, I love talking to you guys. As always, I love your comments. I'm really feeling like I should have did the whole show on X-Men because we have so much more to say. Maybe I'll do that. at some point, just do a whole show on X-Men because there's so much more to say. I think when we get closer to them launching, maybe that's what I'll do. But great talking to everybody. I loved hearing your feedback. So I'm back on Friday. So I will be back next Friday at my regular time, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, for my next weekly live comics chat. So I definitely want you to join. Thank you to all of you that watch me live. And thanks to all of you that are going to watch this on replay. DT2 Comics Chat out.